I'm Evan McMahon. I'm the Executive Director of the Libertarian National Campaign Committee. I'm also an exec member of the Indiana Libertarian Party Central Committee. I'm also the Marion County at-large rep, Marion County being the largest county in Indiana with 800,000 residents.
I'm Rich Tomaso, currently chairman of the New Hampshire affiliate. I'm also the regional rep on the LNC. Prior to that, I was also secretary of our state party. And the more relevant experience is I formed 10 years ago a political action committee focused on liberty issues and focused on legislative action. So most of what I intend to share is stuff we've learned over the last 10 years, how to work in the legislative process, very in-system activism, as opposed to street theater or campaign style activism.
Does anybody in here have experience lobbying or working with legislators?
2.5. So do you, I was curious, does any of your state affiliates have any sort of organized process for looking at legislation or actually training people how to testify or how to do legislative activism?
Okay. We've got a pretty great nonprofit in Texas called Texans for Accountable Government in Austin, and they're really great at teaching everyone how to read bills, how to start the process.
Yeah, one thing we learned, it's about 10 years ago, we saw a need for various reasons, an independent, nonpartisan group to do this in-system activism. We actually had, New Hampshire has the privilege of having elected big L libertarian state representatives. And we worked with Don Gorman, who some of you may know. He ran in our presidential contest in 2000, I think. He was a libertarian leader of the New Hampshire General Court. We took him as our political director, and he showed us a lot of things on how this process works. My experience is a lot of activists and a lot of groups focus on the wrong end of the process. Most of them focus on the very end of it. The bill's up for a vote on the floor of the House or the Senate, and you're putting all your energy into that. Quite honestly, you're too late. 90% of the time or more, the floor is going to vote with whatever the committee said or with whatever leadership wants. You're much better off focusing on the early end of it, and that was one of the lessons we learned. To give you an example of the numbers, in New Hampshire we have a 400-member state house. So if you want something to pass, I have to convince 201 people to vote for it. If I want it, and that's at the end of the thing, or I can go to a 20-member committee and get 11 people to vote for it, or more. And odds are, I don't even have to convince 11 people. I probably only have to convince 3 or 4 to actually switch their vote or actually vote, because there's this small group in the middle. This is sort of a more advanced thing, but most of the times you have about a third of the people one position, a third on the other, and a third in the middle who either don't care or don't know. It's usually just that small group. So I can try to convince 5 people to vote my way, or 200 people to vote my way, or 100 people in the larger legislature. So it's about focusing your resources, which is something we as libertarians have to do. We have to fight smarter, because we can fight hard, but we don't have the numbers. So just like campaigning, we have to fight harder. We have to fight smarter.
One of my experiences in Indiana, and a little bit of background, in 2000 to 2002, I was actually a paid lobbyist, registered lobbyist in California, representing an insurance conglomerate. So it was really evil, but they paid me a lot of money to do it. That was before I was out of the closet as a libertarian. In Indiana, I don't work as a lobbyist per se. I'm a citizen activist because I'm not registered and I'm not paid and I don't actually represent anybody other than myself. But I get the benefit of every legislator knows that I'm a Libertarian, and apparently I'm the president of the Libertarian Party. I've been referred to that on the Senate before. But they all know that I'm a Libertarian and that these are Libertarian ideas. I've built relationships on both sides of the aisle, mostly in the Senate, because they're there a lot longer than the members of the House. But I have some relationships with House members, but I've spent 4 to 5 years building relationships with legislators. We don't always agree on everything. As a matter of fact, sometimes we disagree quite loudly on things. But we can work together on some key issues. And the important thing is when, the legislature in Indiana is a part-time legislature, thank God. They start basically in January, but they have what's called Organization Day, which is actually in November. And that's when the legislature is actually starting to work. That's when they're crafting their bills, they're sending their ideas to legislative services who actually do the legal work of writing the legislation. So that's when you have to have already been approaching these legislators, is to say, because once they submit their bills, they're done. Now they're off to legislative services, and like in Indiana, they only get, a House member gets 10, a senator only gets 5 bills that they can introduce. So we have to work early to try to get them in there. But by having these personal relationships, I can talk to them outside of the session. Meet them for coffee, see them at other events, talk to them, find out where they're going. They know before Organization Day what kind of legislation they're wanting to work on. Sometimes they're always going to have their one pet bill that they might not, they've introduced like 4 or 5 times, and it keeps getting better and it keeps getting stronger, and that's their thing, and they're going to do that. It's already done. Then they've got the couple other ones that they're kind of a little bit passionate about. Then they got the favor bill that they're doing for somebody else, and then they got their last one that they really don't care about, but they're going to file something. So I work to try to have that last bill, that last one, to say, well, here's something that came up in your district. Here's somebody from your district who's concerned about this. Can we talk about that? And the fruit of that was, in the past 2 sessions, I've worked with a Republican senator who introduced a cell phone data protection bill, which essentially makes it a felony for law enforcement to download information from your cell phone without a search warrant. Well, a lot of us would say, well, the Fourth Amendment says that they can't do that. But the police say the law doesn't prohibit them from doing it, therefore they can. When we first started this, it was because the state police had announced that they had purchased a $250,000 mobile unit. It's about this big, that can be hooked up to any cell phone and can copy over every single bit of data, every cell tower that you pinged, every text message you've sent, every photograph you've taken, every tweet you've sent, every Facebook status, anything that you have done on your cell phone can be recorded and viewed by that officer and stored for later usage. All of your contacts, everything. So after hearing that, I met with the senator. He was very passionate about it. He said this is an abuse of power. So we crafted a bill around it. The first year, it went absolutely nowhere. We had a Senate hearing, and it didn't even reach a vote. They tabled it because the state police came in and said, we're not prepared to comment on this bill at this time. The following year, I started my speaking at the Senate committee with, last year the state police said they weren't prepared, the bill is exactly the same, let's hope they're prepared this year to comment. We actually got it out of the Senate committee, it was 8-1, and it went to the Senate floor where it received a unanimous passage. Then it went on to the House, where it died in committee. But it's a gradual process, and now he is incredibly passionate. This is his one bill that he will be introducing every session until it gets passed. When he had his press conference about the unanimous passage of it in the Senate, he actually thanked the Libertarian Party for working with him to protect the rights of Hoosiers. And that's almost exactly what he said. So,
Yeah, that's pretty much everything that everyone was talking about is the experience we had. Say about bills taking a while. It usually takes about 3 tries for any legislation to really, go past the finish line, even if it's popular. I know we had a similar fight with Real ID in New Hampshire. We were the first state to pass legislation, not actual legislation, saying they couldn't do it. We got it through the House. We didn't think it was going to pass at all, but we have a rep who's very keen on privacy issues. He gave a floor on the speech of the House quoting Patrick Henry and swayed the committee. It went against the committee vote. It passed. We had 15 activist groups together, created an alliance, and we pushed it through the Senate, and then Washington sent their people in and killed it. And then the very next year it passed, since it wasn't an election year. One thing that hopefully you can start getting the impression is that this is a lot of work. I don't care if anybody doesn't like this, Libertarians aren't very good at that part. especially the long-term work. I mean, this is like going to war. And really think of it that seriously. And it's really not that hard. You have chains of command, you have communication, you have intelligence, you have counterintelligence. There's even heraldry if you're at the State House. If you know what you're looking for, I can go to my State House and be like, oh, he's been a rep for 20 years, he's a Mason, he likes fishing, those 2 guys hate each other, and there's all this stuff that goes on. The other big part about it is that politics is about people. It's not a computer program. It's not a math problem. People don't vote for stuff because, well, that rep voted, Representative so-and-so voted for it, so I'm voting against it. Or the chair of the committee likes this bill, so I'm going to vote for it, I don't really care. My kid likes the bill, so I'm going to vote for it, they don't know. So the huge piece you have to realize is that this is about people. And that has a huge amount to do with it, and like everyone was saying, the relationships you build. This is a long-term process. I mean, when we have a whole program in place at the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, and we literally started out day 1, okay, everyone show up at the State House at 8 a.m. We're going to meet for breakfast, we're going to talk about what's going on, and we're going to send everybody to committee hearings all day, and you're not going to say a word. And then when we come back, we gathered for lunch, we shared notes, we met some reps, we went back for the afternoon hearings. Didn't say a word. Came back in the afternoon, compared notes. We did that for days before we let anybody testify. This is the kind of discipline you have to have. But now, 10 years later, I probably have a dozen people. I can give them a bill, within 10 minutes, can destroy it in committee. So this is the kind of thing you have to do. Think of it like going to college. It's a 4-year program. Think of it like going in the Army. Okay, first, you're sort of shock troops, and the next year you get your special training. The 3rd year, you're like in the airborne. You can jump in. 4 or 5 years, you're like a Green Beret. You can, go and kill bills and save bills and teach people what they're doing. It's a long-term process, and there's a lot of pieces. There's legislative rules. There's Mason's rules. There's the whole, okay, when does stuff get submitted? Calling your rep after legislative submittal, he's like, sorry,
it's too late.
I can maybe put an amendment to something, which just makes it harder. When do the subcommittees meet? When do the executive sessions meet? There's a whole list of things. Fortunately, most of it's online. There's rules. There's the rules of the House, the rules of the Senate.
Joint rules.
Joint rules. Read them. Most of the reps don't.
There's a bill in Indiana that actually just got, it was originally listed as signed by the governor. We don't have pocket vetoes in Indiana. If the governor doesn't sign a bill, it becomes a law without a signature, but that's how it's officially listed. This is the governor's first term, first legislative session, and it was actually Libertarians, and actually me, who noticed that there's a 7-day deadline for once a bill has been sent to the governor with the signature of the pro tem president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. He has 7 days to act on it. If he doesn't, it's considered passed without his signature. he signed it on the 8th day. And I kind of mentioned it to a couple of people that I don't think this actually gets to say pass with or with his signature because it was the 8th day. And the math is, they look at it and they go, well, it was sent at 5 p.m. on the 22nd. I said, well, we accounted for that and we gave you 7 days, and this was actually, if you didn't count the 22nd, it was 8 days from that when he signed it. So it had not, they removed it from the record and had to relabel it as that, and it was the one bill that he didn't take action on. He's quite pissed about that, by the way. But no one actually thought about it, and the president of the Senate, or the pro tem of the Senate and the speaker of the House have both been in those positions for long enough that they should have known and caught it, but didn't.
Yeah, we've had, this happens a lot when you have big changes. You might have noticed the last 4 years or so we've had lots of turnover. We had a case of our house where they weren't following the rules, and it was like, oh, you didn't give prior notice for that hearing. You have to do it over again. Oh, so you didn't, someone didn't sign off on something, so you have to stop the process and start it over again. There's all these things which, if you know what you're doing, you can sometimes stop bad legislation from ever seeing the light of day. On the other hand, if it's a really good bill, you better make sure the rep sponsoring it is doing everything. A lot of this stuff is handled by staff or legislative services, but occasionally you can get lucky and sometimes stop stuff.
Now, when we're looking at legislative success, are we looking at it from are we representing ourselves as a Libertarian Party, or are you looking at it from building a coalition for each issue, or?
There's sort of two answers to that. What we did we looked at the political reality and we created an independent group, which is, the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, I say without contradiction, is the most effective state-level liberty activist group in the country, because we work very hard at it. We have dozens, possibly even 100 volunteers working on this stuff. If you can do it within the Libertarian Party, I recommend it because it's an amazing avenue of activism. You can do it in your pajamas at midnight, reading a bill and reviewing it. You can prep stuff. It's a great thing to do. Most, especially states with part-time legislatures, you have the legislative season and then the political campaign season. So it's a great thing to do off-season. For people, once you get the system set up, there's lots of pieces. We could literally talk for days about this. But you can do things like, if you have a system to review bills, well, whatever, I can review a bill of the night. I can't sleep, I'm going to review a bill. That'll usually put you to sleep pretty fast. But it's something you can do if you don't live near the Capitol. If you're in a big Western state, you're not going to drive to your state capital. I can get to my whole state's within an hour of the state capital. It's easy for people to get there. A lot of you weren't that lucky, so there's lots of pieces for people to do. But if you can do it within the LP, and you don't just have to, you can identify yourself as libertarian. You don't have to say Libertarian Party. But if people realize, oh, these libertarians are on top of things, and then as the broad-based group, because a lot of you groups, you have like a gun owners group and a taxpayers group, maybe marijuana group, and they're doing single issue stuff. So what we found a lot was we were the broad sort of umbrella, and then as stuff came up, we're like, hey, homeschoolers, we got something. You want to help out? Hey, medical marijuana. Hey, gay marriage. Oh, actually, we didn't get involved in that one. So it's something you can bring in these single issue groups, and then you're sort of the expert on the process, and they're the expert on the subject. And you can both learn from each other. It's a great way to build friendships and alliances, especially for groups that are generally pro-liberty, and then you can sort of teach them how to do this. The progressive groups don't teach them technology, just use their help when you need it.
The way we've kind of split it up in Indiana, just by default, it didn't happen through an executive committee or anything like that, was there's a couple of us who are well connected in the State House, as in we have those relationships, we've built them through working with legislators. Myself, Brad Klopfenstein, who was our lieutenant governor candidate, has been doing this for years, well respected on both sides of the aisle, in both chambers. So we're kind of the guys that go in to meet with legislators and discuss bills, think about where they're going. We're the guys that will probably have the sit-down conversations with somebody that's supporting legislation that we're against. I'll give you the example. The legislator that I was talking about, who I worked with him on the cell phone bill, was also one of the authors of the constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriage in Indiana. And so it's real fun when people see the two of us out having dinner talking. But we've talked about this for 4 years, and his position is not my position, but it's definitely changed because it's been a 4-year-long process. So we have that side, where we're the direct connection between the legislators and kind of the boots on the ground in the State House. We're the ones that when somebody says, hey, what's going on with this, who's involved in it, we know all the data about it. If you walk into my office and ask me for any of the bills, we have a lot, but the vast majority of them, and I wish I had brought it with me, I actually have a folder with little tabs in it that I have every version, every draft of the bill, every amendment, the roll call on it. I have notes about the hearings. I know the sponsors. I actually even break down to who the sponsors are and their constituent base, just in case I can get a couple of people to call and talk to them. And so I have this file that I keep on every bill. And I do this at the beginning of every session as the bills are coming in. I produce this file. Now I have my ones that have the gold stars on them, which are the ones that I like and that I want to support. I have the ones with the red stars on them, which are the ones that I want to absolutely kill. And then I have the ones with the blue, because I'm a nerd. The blue stars are the ones that we actually were the ones working with the legislators on, that introduced that legislation. So we have that. Then we have the party who releases statements about the legislation that's going on. Governor Pence just signed SB 621, which was the state legislature taking away the 4 at-large seats for the county council in Marion County. Pence is a Republican. These seats were held by Democrats. They also gave the mayor unfettered control over the budget. He can actually change the budget at will at this point. So we were obviously not supportive of that move and put out statements about it. So that was the party's involvement in it, was to either speak for or against legislation as official policy from the party. Then we have our activist base, who then are the ones who send out the emails and the tweets and create the fun Facebook photos and things like that, that are now involved in spreading that message of, we don't like this is what you have to do to change it. The pressure was so high on that particular piece of legislation that it came down to the last 3 hours of that bill, where it was going to end up being passed without his signature, but he was actually considering vetoing it. Whereas when the bill was first being passed in the Senate, he was 100% behind it. And there was no question whether or not he was going to sign it the day he got it. To now it's 3 hours before, he's actually debating whether or not it's going to be one of the 3 bills he vetoes. And it was because of the pressure that was put on him by, in conjunction with Libertarians and the Democrats. We kind of worked together to do that. So that's how we break things down. We have the 3 different sections of the organizing.
Yeah, the alliance is another big part of it. We have a whole system in our state where we go through every bill. We have people review them, we rate them. We have a whole scoring triage system, and then we actually at the end of the year, which is another big piece, is we actually have a report card on all the reps based on the roll calls. Voters like that, reps don't. We actually had, we were at a fair passing out a report card, and someone said, "You gave my rep an F. I'm taking his sign out of my yard." And we have very small districts in my state, so people, all his neighbors, "Hey, why'd you take the sign down?" "Well, so and so, blah blah blah." So some states the logistics may not work as well, but keeping track of these reps so you can follow them. But the relationships is important. We have one rep. I obviously, ballot access is very important to me. One of the reps that we consistently rated D is my ballot access champion. There was a whole bunch of Democrats that we were giving very low ratings, but they liked that I was helping them pass marriage equality. I built a lot of good friendships there. We even have libertarians disagreeing with each other. I actually testified against one of my state reps who was my friend. We testified on opposite sides of the bill. The very next bill, we switched on opposite sides again. So I say politics is about people. The other thing to remember is it's not personal. It's just business. It's very easy in these political fights, and you see it now in the major media, where it's so personal. Everyone gets all riled up about it. Don't. It's like your job, because you never know. One rep is going to, that same rep who submits the awful bill, tomorrow is going to submit the great bill, and you're going to need each other's help. So if you keep it professional, it's like, and you build these relationships. If you can have a beer with the state rep at the end of the day, you've done your job well. And if you have one of these state reps and you can now go have a beer afterwards, he's going to listen to you, or she's going to listen to you when you have objections. You're not just a crazy libertarian. You're like, oh, it's like, oh, okay, I understand. Like, they'll actually listen to you, and even if you don't have a conversation, if you're in committee hearing, they're like, they'll say, okay, I know you're a reasonable person. They'll accept you for who you are, and they're more likely to listen to you and hear what you're saying, not just, oh, you hate my bill, or you hate this bill, or we have different positions. So yeah, building these relationships. How many of you know who your state rep is? Okay, most places people have no idea who their state rep is.
How many of you have had?
Yeah, how many of you have taken them out to lunch or had a drink with them or been over their house?
Yeah, I went over to his house and talked to him, and I don't know.
Okay, so I mean,
But have you done something outside of an event with them?
non-political.
I debated him.
Okay, well, obviously, if you're a candidate, but even
Some of us have the ability to just have them come to us, which is fantastic because of
but for your average, if you're starting this cold, keep in mind that I would rather have an activist who can call up their state rep and get on a first-name basis with them than necessarily a guy who's going to review, in detail a whole bunch of bills because, Representative Smith, we have a problem with him. Bob knows him. Bob, call him. Or Bob, invite him to a meeting. We want to figure this out. Or like, hey, if Representative Smith is kind of strong on this issue, maybe he can sponsor a bill for us. Bob, make the introduction. Because this politics stuff, it's all about the relationships. That's really, especially in a lot of states where you have this professional political class, they all know each other, they all went to the same schools, they hang out together, they talk to each other, and it's these relationships that get built up, and sometimes it's a multi-year, oh, you helped me on this bill, so I'm going to help you on that one. There's a lot going on that the more we can get involved in that process in a principled way, really go a long way for being effective.
How much horse trading do you think you guys have to end up doing in terms of working on a bill that may not be a top priority for you to cultivate that relationship? I mean, obviously we're not going to betray our principles, but something that isn't part of your legislative agenda, but
if the opportunity's there, take it. The other big thing we have to do is resource management. We have very small teams. You only have so much time. And especially once you get in the busy part of the legislative season, you're like, okay, they're hearing 50 bills this week. I don't have 50 activists, so what are we going to work on? What's important? What's not going to pass? What will pass no matter what we do? We have to worry about this. But building these relationships, if the opportunity comes across, I'd say take it. It can be, for your own rep, it's usually not that big a deal to make that step because you're a constituent and a politician's going to pay attention to their constituents. Beyond that, if you got someone who wants to do it, great, but as you do this more, it'll start happening.
And really, I hate to say this, but you're courting them at this point. If you're just starting in this game, you're courting them. If you go to them and try to push a bill on them, you're not going to get anywhere. What I would recommend to somebody who actually wants to to try to take this on is research the legislation of some of your key legislators. See where they fall on a lot of the issues you like. Pick 5 to 10 of them, and then go meet them. And when I say go meet them, I mean meet them in a professional setting, either at an event or in the State House. Not at their church, not at their kids' school, not in the grocery store, not at the strip club. Maybe at the strip club. And go up to them, and there's actually a type of conversation you want to have, and it's called ass kissing. You start off by thanking that legislator for something that they've done. Some bill that they put forward, and something that you need to actually know about and that you do agree with. But so thank them for their work on such and such bill. I really appreciated how passionate you were at defending this, and I wish it would have gone farther. I'd like to help you with that in the future. I think that there's a good benefit for people like me who are libertarians to work with legislators like you. If you ever need any assistance on any bills, if you want something drafted in a libertarian speak to send out to our followers, I'd be happy to do that. Here's my contact information. And then follow up with them again in a couple of weeks. That will get your foot in the door more than you're a statist scum.
Most politicians are used to getting yelled at.
By constituents.
If you can, or activist groups, if you say, hey, that was, but we really liked that. Thank them for it. Thank them publicly. Thank them personally. It does stand out. It does build some goodwill.
If you can't find a positive thing to say about that legislator, that's not one of the legislators you want to try to work with.
Do you recommend approaching the staff to form the introduction?
Sometimes.
Sometimes you have to.
I typically, when meeting a legislator for the first time, avoid the staff. If I actually want to then schedule something, then I try to go and introduce myself to the staff and talk to them. The staff are the absolute gatekeepers, especially when you're starting off. What you're going to get is, I have 5 minutes to talk to you on Tuesday as I'm heading to this committee meeting, meet me outside my office, and they will walk with you and nod their head and not say anything the entire time. Now, if you actually get in good with a staff member, now that staff member can actually say, you've got 10 minutes in the office, you've got 15 minutes in the office, and the staffer is going to push your agenda as well. So if you do have a piece of legislation or you have something like that that you can present to the staffer after a while, they're going to be the ones who's putting that in the legislator's hand. If it's my relationship with most staffers comes from my relationship with the legislators that I've built. There are staffers that I know very well, and it's because I don't know the legislators. And so I go through the staffers for that reason. But if you get the opportunity to build a relationship with the staff, treat them like gold. Because they can put you up on a pedestal, they can make sure that your issue is at the very top, or they can make sure that they never know who you are.
That's part of we said before, know the rules of the House. Well, there's a whole other rule book that isn't written down. And that's part of knowing every state's different. In my state, for example, state reps don't have staff. The committee has a secretary and there's a legislative researcher, and that's it. So they're very accessible. My state senate has staff. They each have their own office. That's much more of you're not a lobbyist, so okay, maybe 5 minutes. In which case, you want to get to know. You may need to get to know the staff. So that's part of learn the lay of the land. If you have a part-time legislature is different from a full-time legislature. The size of the legislature. Your state has different. Each state has different issues that you can find wins on, and things that they're never going to happen. So it's really, like I said, it's like war. Do your intelligence gathering and find out. Sometimes it's
And part of the reason why I try to avoid the staff for the legislators that I know is because in Indiana, the State House, one staffer represents 3 to 5 legislators. So they're really busy, and the last thing they want to do is deal with me. So that's part of it. If I can go straight to the legislator, then that's what I try to do as often as possible. If I don't have an in with the legislator, then I try to get in with the staffer. So
you got to find your opportunities, but study like I said, we actually had a training program, technically it's still in place, where you go in and look around and listen and see what's going on, where all the rooms are, where are the lockers, where do they go smoke, where do they go to drink afterwards.
Exactly, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Where they socialize.
Where they socialize, because that's just, I mean, we've all been to libertarian conventions, you're at the business meeting and everything important happens in the hallway parties after. Legislatures aren't much different. I mean, plenty of legislation gets decided over beer and burgers at the place across the street, or at a county committee meeting, or at a state convention. A lot of this stuff gets worked out behind the scenes. So knowing where all this, knowing where the state agencies, where they fit in. Do they do lobbying? Do they do illegal lobbying? How much influence, if you're in a state where the secretary of whatever, sometimes whatever they say goes, and they have more power than the committee chairs. Some states, maybe they don't have a lot of influence. So that's part of what you learn observing this, and that's how you have to, as part of the very pragmatic and hard decisions you have to make, for your resource management, for where you're putting things, and the relationships you're going to have to build to work around these. There's a question in the back.
Yeah. One thing our state parties can do, you're asking about horse trading. One of the things we have to trade is whether we run candidates in the races of the person we're lobbying with. We can reward people by not running a libertarian against a very good legislator who's good on ballot access or good on tax cuts, and by running a libertarian either to the left or to the right of the really disgusting ones, and I mean that with love. We did this in Texas. The Texas Libertarian Party, every year since Ron Paul was first elected to Congress, filed a candidate against Ron Paul that they withdrew after Dr. Paul won the primary. We wanted everybody to know that we thought he was a great guy. We can't endorse, that's part of our platform and part of our rules, but we can show a thumbs up and a good nod to someone who's a good vote by not running against him. And it's not like you threaten people, it's you reward them. You think, you've done such a good job, I'm going to be talking to our executive committee, and I want to make sure we don't run anybody in your race so that it doesn't interfere with your chance to get reelected. We appreciate you. And you may have 2 or 3 legislators who are like that. I know you do in your legislature. You've got...
But we have party members running as Republicans and Democrats, so that's sort of how we solve the problem.
Yeah.
And I've actually been asked by, just this past year, probably a dozen legislators asking for that very same thing.
Yeah.
And my answer to them each and every single time is, while I may not actively seek or recruit a candidate to run against you, I will not ever talk a candidate out of running. If somebody wants to run for that office and they're passionate about it and they want to challenge you, I'm not going to stop them from doing it. I'm not going to get in the way. And I would probably sit down with a candidate and I may have a conversation with them. This actually just kind of happened. One Republican was we just went through redistricting. This was the first Senate race after redistricting. And this senator was now going up against a Democrat. And it seemed like it was a very competitive district. And a Libertarian in that district probably would have pulled more from the Republican in that district. At least that was the feeling. Actually, the person that would have been running probably would have pulled more from the Democrat. But there was a significant concern by that legislator because he saw that a Libertarian would be a spoiler in that race, and asked me to help prevent that from happening. And my response was, while I may not actively try to recruit somebody to run in that district, I'm not going to talk somebody out of it. Had somebody decided to run, or was thinking about running, I would have said, if you're not serious about this, if you're not seriously going to campaign every day, if you're not going to go out, raise money, get in the media, and represent the party in a positive way and legitimately try to win this, you could end up setting us back in the legislature, because you're going to end up getting the Democrat elected, who hates everything that we stand for in a fiscal standpoint, and actually would have been a Democrat who probably wouldn't have been with us us on some of the more liberal social stuff, which is kind of funny. But anyway, it ended up not happening, but it would have been something that I honestly wouldn't have made that decision either. I would have gone to my state leadership and said, this was brought to me, this candidate is running. What do you guys think? Should we sit down with this candidate and make sure that they're serious? Because we don't want to end up losing a good legislator over somebody who just didn't want to do anything. But most of those legislators were also very desperate at the time to come and ask me that, because they already know what I'm going to say is, well, I won't recruit, I'm not going to talk anybody out of it. You're just SOL if somebody decides to run. But then it's up to you to be able to stand there as a Republican and say, I've worked with Libertarians, I'm good on these issues, and I've had the support of Libertarians on these issues. Go for it. You've had it on public record.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Or you can just switch parties and run with us because you believe you're a Libertarian.
Yeah, we had that issue in our state where we were like, oh, we had a couple, RLC Republicans in a district, and we ran a Libertarian, and they're like, oh wait, you might dilute the vote. And so I'm like, well, as a state chair, I'd hate, if someone actually wants to run for office, I would really hate to say no. And that's something each of your state exec boards are going to have to decide. And if you get to the point where you're actually horse trading whether you're going to run candidates.
You're doing good.
Yeah. So you're.
Oh, yeah.
It's not exactly a first world problem, but you're getting there.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's a lot easier to recruit volunteers and raise money for a campaign you don't run. There's almost no money to be raised, and it's no work at all.
This does remind me of one thing. This kind of activism is great for candidates. Because if you're going to run for state rep or state senate, now if you're doing this process, you know the process. And you know your opponent a lot better. Because you're like, oh, what votes do they have? Like I said, we've been electing, some of you are party members, but libertarians to our state legislature for the last 3 or 4 elections, but in mass. Well, and a lot of them are activists that we've trained. They know the process. As freshmen, they know the process better than a lot of it. We've had freshman reps be committee clerks, which just doesn't happen.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, sophomore reps being, I think we even had a sophomore who was a committee chair, because they know the process. We study this thing. We know the rules better. I go to a committee hearing and I'll like tell her, why didn't you just do that? I can do that. I'm like, you're the rep. You're supposed to know this. You liked this bill. You should know how to save it. And you're pulling your hair out, especially for newer reps. They just, read the rule book. It's right there. You can know how to do this. But this is great actually for candidates, because you can be doing all this stuff, and then come campaign season, you can be saying, oh, well, the legislature was working on such and such, and I know, Representative Smith, who was running, voted against this, even though the constituents in our district vote for it, because most people don't know how the reps vote on individual bills.
Right.
So you can bring a lot of, you can shine a lot of sunshine on this, and then the process, so you can speak intelligently and say things like, well, when I go to the state capitol and I'm talking about these issues, representing the people of this district and bringing their concerns, I'm going to be continuing in that spirit. So you can say it factually, and you know what's going on, and it gives you a lot of credibility, especially if you're not an office holder already. That there's a credibility gap that we often face, and you can overcome a lot of that because you know the process and you know what's going on, and you can talk about and talk about bills that your opponent sponsored that are just bad bills, and really embarrass them, make them defend their own ideas. And so just generally have fun with it in a campaign. So this is very good for candidates too, to be involved in.
We have a couple of House candidates for 2014 in Indiana that have really stepped up, and we actually have a private group on Facebook called the Libertarian Legislative Think Tank, and we literally post bills and we discuss them. We talk about them, and actually we have 6 or 7 legislators who are actually part of that group that will comment on legislation or just watch what we're saying.
It's actually an open group.
It's closed.
The think tank one is open.
You have to be invited to join.
Yeah, but you can see it.
Oh yeah, everybody can see it, but you have to be invited to comment. And
So
stuff
it's
like that.
transparent.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
But so we know that has an effect on some legislation and on some legislators because they see what's being said. But we have a couple of candidates who have been very active in there. And really what they're doing is it's not even they're talking about, these candidates aren't focusing on the policy itself. What they're looking at is, I don't understand this section of the bill. Can we talk about this? I want to understand why this is worded like this. Why is this broken down into this section? What does this mean? So they're really trying to understand the actual technical language of the legislation. So that when they're running, they have a reason to say, this is what I'm going to present in my first year. This is what I'm going to do as a legislator. And they can actually craft their own legislation.
Yeah.
The other thing is if you look at, in most states, a freshman legislator will have a one-page bill that comes from a legislative services or whatever legal counsel they have for drafting legislation. It will be a one-page bill. The same topic, presented by a senior legislator, will be 27 pages long with an appendix. And the reason why is because legislative services doesn't think that freshman legislator has any clout or any power or authority, so they spend less time working on their legislation. There was one bill, we have the I-STEP, it's a standardized test in Indiana for all students to take, and it sucks and it's horrible, and Republicans and Democrats seem to be in agreement that the standardized testing sucks and that we should get rid of it, but then they disagree about what we should do after we get rid of it. So one fairly new legislator in the Senate presents, asks the legislative services to draft a bill repealing I-STEP. And literally all they did was they went in and removed any section that had anything to do with I-STEP, and it was about a page and a half. There was another senator who is ineffective, and no one likes him. And he presented the same thing, and it was almost identical bills. They were different enough to justify them being both being authored, but they were basically the same bill. There was another senator who's been there forever and is, well respected, and his thing was massive. It removed all kinds of statutes on testing and the requirements for having some sort of standardized test, and it did everything. But if you actually look at the original notices that were sent to the legislative services for all three senators, they all basically said the exact same thing, which was, we want to repeal I-STEP. And they got 3 different versions, and they were 2 crappy 1.5 pages, and then a massive education reform bill. And so, by a candidate, a libertarian, knowing these things, when they get elected, they're going to be able to draft their own thing and run it through legislative services themselves, which is, you can completely do that. It's just, I can only count maybe in 10 states that I know legislators, maybe 7 actual legislators who craft their own legislation. Maybe 7. And even then, it's other people kind of helping them do it. But so if we can do that, then we know we're getting the best bill possible. And it's difficult to do, but it's not impossible, and it just takes the willingness to learn how to do it.
And even if it's not your bill, I've written legislation and handed it to a legislator to submit. I know dozens of people who've done that because they know the process. I specialize in election law because for obvious reasons. I probably know the statutes better than all but like 2 of the reps on the election law committee. Because I've been doing this a long time, and I'm sure most of them are the senior reps who are actually election officials and they know this stuff. So, working stuff. I've had reps come to me saying, "Hey, Rich, is this okay?" And I'll read it and go, "No, you forgot about this," and stuff, and hand it back to them. If you're an effective activist at this level, that's the kind of power you can have, where you're helping to write legislation, or at least the first draft, because it goes through legislative services and they change stuff around, and the rep has to sign off, and sometimes the co-sponsors have to sign off, and there's stuff going on. But if the first draft is good, you know, you're a step ahead of the game, because a lot of reps will do like, I want to write a bill that repeals X, and legislative services has to guess what they meant. Or, you know, I want a bill about puppy dogs. I'm like, what? You know, and stuff like that happens, and so you get crappy bills, and they don't go anywhere, and they waste everyone's time. But if you have good legislation going forward, that's a very seriously crafted bill, the other reps are like, oh, okay, this guy did his homework. He covered all the things about it, and it covers all the sections, and you've got all the sort of side effect pieces of legislation that go along with it, and there's a good fiscal note, and there's all these things that you learn about when you read this that you have to be concerned about. You can go a long way. And as you read these bills and you get very good at it, when you go testify, you can say, well, you know, this bill does so-and-so, but you guys should figure out how much, you know, paragraph 4, that's going to cost a lot of money. And I don't see a fiscal note on this bill. And now I just sent it into a subcommittee and a whole tizzy, and it probably is going to die because they didn't account for the money. In some states they don't care, but in a lot of states, you know, they actually do care if stuff costs money. So there's these things you can learn as an activist as you really start getting into this on how these are put together. And if you actually get elected, then you're putting good bills forward, and your committee chairman likes you because you're not wasting their time with stupid bills. And then as you hopefully get reelected, your influence grows.
Are you focused on working with the majority on our issues that the majority would kind of coalesce with us? Or is it just kind of a free-for-all based on what the issue of the day, week, month, session is?
It's a question of resources. You know when in your state, you know sort of if the parties have sort of a big broad area where we have agreement on and where we don't. And so, like I said, when you have a majority of one thing and you have enough friends, there's more you can do. When it flips around, you work on the other issues. And sometimes you can still get stuff through. So there is some of that tactical thing you just have to be aware of. But I mean, there's people who will. I mean, there's always going to be a gun control bill. There's always going to be a tax increase bill. You know, if you're lucky, there's always going to be a ballot access bill to work on. So this stuff comes back year after year after year, and hopefully, if you have enough people, you can start getting people specializing. But in the sort of the broad scheme of things, yes, it's. And I can only speak from my own experience. You know, when we have a big Republican majority, I can probably get some tax cuts through. When the Democrats were in power, I can get marriage equality through. You know, and you gotta work with what you gotta work with. And I imagine most states have there's some of that sort of tactical, practical reality that's gonna happen. Sometimes you get lucky, something will pop, and you gotta be ready. I mean, Real ID popped unexpectedly for us. We got lucky and we kept going. We had a homeschooling bill that we thought was going to go nowhere, and it got a favorable recommendation out of committee. And we were like, this was like our second year, and we're like, what the hell do we do now? And so we get everything together, and we got it passed out of committee, and we got it passed through the House, and then we have to go to the Senate, which is where good legislation goes to die in most states. And thankfully, we have a big homeschool community, so we had to build these alliances fast. But a committee hearing full of well-behaved children is great. We're on your side. And we actually follow up a couple years later when the Dems came into power, they tried to repeal homeschooling. We had 1,000 homeschool families show up to the hearing. That bill died like 397 to 2 or something. It was ridiculous. And all the reps are going, there's a whole bunch of kids here and they're doing their homework. So I can assure you homeschooling will never there'll be no more new homeschooling legislation in my state after that. Because we actually got them involved. You know, that was so we don't have to worry about that issue anymore. They're going to take care of it by themselves.
That's cool.
I have trouble keeping one volunteer loyal. How did you recruit 100?
Yeah.
Well, we started off with a board of 5 people, and we did most of the work. We basically said, hey, anyone who wants to do it, and we had some cachet. I mean, we were all very well-known activists. We had former state legislators who said, we're going to shepherd you through this process. We're going to train you. We're not just going to throw you to the wolves. We're going to train you. Everyone's going to meet X time, you know, and there's a whole bunch of practicalities I'd like to get into at some point, but it was like, okay, you're going to show up at this time, you're going to wear these kinds of clothes. You know, we literally told, you know, men, you're wearing a jacket and tie. I don't care. You don't wear a jacket and tie, we're not going to take you anywhere. You know, this is where you're going to meet, this is what you're going to be doing. And literally just sort of held their hand through it. And we just had enough people who were interested. And when they saw that we were serious about this and what we could do, and I live in kind of this sort of utopian state where, like, you know, I remember once my friends and I were talking, we had a banking question, like we were thinking about forming a co-op bank. And we were like, oh, there's the banking commissioner, let's just go ask him. He was walking through. So I realize I live in a utopia where unicorns poop rainbows. Some of your states are going to have something, you know, like that. It was sort of, this sort of thing happens. Other states are going to have different realities, but if you show people that, and we also tell them that we can be effective at this, and that's the big thing for activists. They want to be active, they want to be effective. And if you can tell them, look, we're going to start small. That was the other big thing, is start small. You are much better off doing a few things well than a whole bunch of things half-assed. So if you've only got 5 or 10 people, okay, manage your resources for 5 or 10 people. There's going to become things, and you'll learn a lot more by the follow-through. Take a bill if it's going, if passing subcommittee, going to the floor, going to the next chamber, going to the governor, follow it all the way through. You will learn a lot more than just, okay, what's the next bill this week? That's really the big thing. And as you get successes, the activists will come to you. Because activists want to be active, they want to do successful things. You know, you're occasionally, for us, that homeschooling bill, for those of you who don't follow homeschooling, just basically, there's sort of 3 big sections of legislation. There's like registering your kids, there's the curriculum, and there's like one of like the evaluation piece. Mm-hmm. We ripped out the curriculum piece, which is the big burden. Basically, a third of the legislation, we just ripped it out. And that got a lot of the homeschool families who in our state were pretty much on the underground. They got out, and then we had this huge win. Dude, we repealed 1/3 of this section of law, which, you know, for libertarians is red meat. Like, oh, you did that? Okay, what else can we rip a third out of? You know, and so we were going at that. So, you know, it's gonna happen. You know, when you get one of those things, you know, get the trumpets out, broadcast it, and get there, and invite people. You know, tell people, you know, just come to the State House for a day with us.
There's an important thing that comes before the victory, and it's clear guidelines. What is this volunteer's responsibility? What are their objectives? What are their goals? What do they expect from you as leadership? And what do you expect from them as a volunteer? They're putting their time into this, and so think about it like this. The federal minimum wage is, what, $7.50 an hour or something like that? Okay, well, if they were an intern, because you can't have unpaid interns anymore, you would have to pay them $7.50 an hour. Are you just going to let them sit around and play around on Facebook? Or are you going to have clear guidelines for what their job duties are? The more structure you have for people, the more that they can get done and feel accomplished. And if somebody feels accomplished in what they're doing, then they're going to stick around longer. And when you have these successes, it becomes a prestige thing. I worked on this campaign to repeal this law or to push this thing. I was part of this, and you have to reward them with that by giving them some sort of acknowledgement for doing that, for putting in their time. And then you can have things where this is now the breeding ground for, hey, I know if I go here, I can learn how to be a lobbyist. I don't have to go to an Ivy League school and spend $250,000. I can go here, and hopefully they'll do it for the forces of good, or they'll decide to go and get $150,000 a year as a lobbyist. But you can be that place where you come to earn your bones and to learn how to do this, making those connections to the legislature. I mean, I have had 2 volunteers that work with me quite regularly this past session, who it was because they wanted to be legislators, they wanted to build contacts because they wanted to eventually be lobbyists. I told them they needed to do it for the forces of good, not evil, but I did tell them if they did, represent evil, they had to give a donation back. So, but you have to have those clear-cut guidelines. It can't be a typical libertarian event where it's just, what do you want to do, do what you want to do. There has to be clear leadership and saying, what are your skills, what are your qualifications, what are you good at, what do you want to do. Let's find the role for you in that criteria, and here's what you're supposed to do. And they need to be clearly stated and clearly written. And there also has to be accountability for not achieving, or not necessarily achieving, but not following through with your required objectives and duties. It's not you're fired because they're a volunteer, but it's maybe we should pare this back for you. Maybe you need to do something a little smaller, or talking to, or we're trying to figure out, is this not right for you? Is there something that's going to be better? Are you going to be better at writing these statements as opposed to doing these phone calls? Finding the position, but you have to be a leader, and especially as I'm understanding you were a candidate, right? Okay. I'm going to make Mr. Cloud very happy in the back right now. That shouldn't be your job. Setting those goals, setting those criteria, and doing those things shouldn't be your function as a candidate. That should be your volunteer or support staff coordinator. That should be somebody on your team, because your function is supposed to be raising money and talking to voters. It's somebody else's job to manage those volunteers. And so you want to look for somebody who has that leadership quality, that has that management skill of not just monitoring and tasking people, but being able to retask people based off of the original perceived strengths and weaknesses, followed up by their actual strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, the one thing that we did the training is that there's lots of jobs to do for this. And we have a whole system set up where, the computer guys, you import all the data from the state website that has the legislation and the docket and everything. You write the program to automate that piece. Okay, you guys write the form for the bill review. Okay, you people, you can do a bill review, and you have to understand that this is important. Like, I told people, oh, you reviewed that bill, and because based on your notes, that's what I used to start my testimony with. So they know what they're doing actually will see the light of day. And you get people who want to testify that they're either good public speakers and they want to learn that, they want to get involved. Sometimes you got people, they don't speak a lot, they don't want to speak in public, but they'll talk to a rep in the hallway or side, or they'll have a beer with them, or they smoke, so they can go in the smoking room. So there's lots of, they're not little jobs. I mean, if you break it down into discrete pieces, from a systems point of view, there's several pieces along the way. Sometimes you have people who can write beautiful testimony, but they can't deliver it. I mean, I've written testimony for other people. We had one day where, like I said, it was one of those 50 bills, and we had like 10 people on the thing, and I'm like, okay, I can do these. I'm like, I have these 2 bills I want to testify on at the same time. Who wants to deliver this testimony? All I have to do is read it. And I handed it to him, like, sign your name at the bottom, and it's yours. Those are the kinds of things you can do, and it's a lot of mentoring. I said, this is where the work comes in. You need a team of leaders who are willing to put in the work. We literally, we're training people, sort of like, okay, you reviewed this bill, have someone who sort of knew the process better go over their review and sort of like an editor check it. You're going to deliver testimony? Fine, deliver your testimony and we'll review it. No, you got to change that paragraph. No, you got to do this. Practice, practice, practice. You want to go to the State House? Fine. I'm going on Tuesday morning. Come with me. Shadow me. See what I do. See who I talk to, and really, put the effort. If you put the effort in, and someone wants to do this, they'll respond. It's that first generation. You're going to do all the work, and then that second generation comes in, and you can mentor them to do, to do the stuff. Because at this point, from a value perspective, I shouldn't necessarily be doing this sort of day-to-day stuff. People like me, and we have a core team of about a dozen people who've been doing this a long time. You send us in for the tough jobs and the stuff that you need the finesse, or like, okay, yeah, I know these reps. I know how to. I know so and so. If I I know he loves this article of the Constitution, so if I can afford to leverage that, or I know I'm from his hometown, so if I come and testify and say, hey, I'm from Manchester, all the reps from Manchester perk up. You know, that kind of thing, you need to, again, as part of those, as part of the advanced classes on this. But really, you put in the effort, but realize that, you know, if you do it from a party structure, this may be your full-time ED if you have one. This may be what they do if they're not doing other things. Or you find a way to have someone to have time. It's easier, again, if you have a part-time legislature, because it's usually just a few months during the year where they can do this. And like, okay, fine, I can commit to 1 day a week. I'll go up there and train people. Some of the training you can do, like, we do trainings on the weekends. Okay, this is how you read a bill. This is how you deliver testimony. So you can sort of work it out ahead of time so people are ready if they can go off. But you've got to train them. I can't tell you how many times I see libertarians and like they open their mouth and 5 seconds later I've stopped listening to them. So if I've stopped listening to you, what do you think the rank and file Democrats and Republicans are doing? And I tell them that and they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, it was a bill about whatever and you started talking about the Roman Empire. You know, or like, yeah, well, you lasted a whole minute before you brought up the Bilderbergers. That's a record for you. Don't be that guy. Please don't be that guy. Which is why a lot of libertarians have to be trained out of their habits.
You have to learn how to speak to a legislator, and you have to be able to speak to people of different political persuasions.
And that's all you're going to be talking to. You're not going to be talking to libertarians at all.
And if I'm talking to a Democrat about gun control, I am not going to be talking to them about the Second Amendment and the revolution and tyranny. What I'm going to be talking to that Democrat about is public safety. And I'm going to be talking to them about the Civil Rights Act and the Black Panthers in Philadelphia and what would have happened to them if law enforcement had said to them, you have to register all of the shotguns and all of the ammunition. You know, we wouldn't have had a civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr. Applied for a handgun permit and was denied and carried one anyway because he needed to protect himself. So I'm going to talk to them about that. I already know because I'm, you know, a libertarian. I know the Constitution and can talk to a Republican about the Constitution and revolution and tyranny, and I'm great on that. We need to get better about talking more, about using the vernacular and the language that the person we're talking to needs to hear. So when I'm talking about gay marriage to a Republican, I am not going to be talking to them about freedom from religion. I'm not going to be talking to them about, you know, my right to do whatever I want in privacy of my own bedroom, because they honestly don't have that separation. They don't actually see that. So instead, what I'm going to talk to them about is the 1,138 rights, benefits, and privileges denied to homosexual couples that are automatically granted to heterosexual couples, including property dissolution, next of kin status, tax status. Tax is the big one, because gay couples are actually taxed doubly because they can't file jointly. So I go through those more fiscal things, and I talk about that. That brings them over more. I was actually able to convince a Tea Party group, the Indiana Tea Party, to give me a table to talk about marriage equality at their tax day rally.
Nice.
They gave me a table to do that, and then the organizer of the event had to stand at my table for an hour because people kept coming up to me wanting to kill me. And she would take my literature, my information from Marriage Equality USA and say, no, okay, yeah, homosexuality bad, it's a sin, they're going to hell, we know that, okay. But what we're talking about is, did you know that they're getting taxed doubling? Like here's a sample tax return for a heterosexual couple and one from a same-sex couple, and then this is, you know, they're the same monies, they actually pay more in taxes. So everything that we're talking about taxed enough already is, you know, they're paying more taxes than we are, and that's just not fair, so we should talk about that. And I'm like, I love you, that's awesome.
And this should be happening all over the country. This isn't magic. You build these relationships, you can talk about them. The learning how to talk to non-libertarians, you get a lot of libertarians they get involved in stuff, and they don't understand how to talk to other non-libertarians, especially if your group gets kind of insular. One of the things we actually do teach people is it's not exactly public speaking training, but it's persuasive speech training. and you have 3 minutes or less to make your point. And I'm not kidding. Watch people talk for 3 minutes. Half the room stops listening to you. For 4 minutes, the other half has stopped listening to you. And for point of reference, 1 page single space typed is 3 minutes. Your entire universe is on 1 page. That's all you get. Now, if you're smart, you make it so they ask you questions and you get the rest of your stuff up. But that's it. You get 3 minutes or less to make your point. If you can't do it, you have too much to say. You know, if you want, you get your buddy to make the other half of the points and you split it up sometimes. But imagine, you know, your average TV commercial is less than 1 page of script. And in 30 seconds or less, they need you to buy a car. So in 3 minutes or less, I should be able to get you to vote on something, or at least seriously think about it.
In 10 seconds of that commercial is the engine revenue.
Yeah. So, I mean...
How many of you would like to know the secret to learning how to talk to Democrats? Okay.
Why not?
Watch CNN and MSNBC. Listen to the language they use and use that back. It's
their words.
It's exactly what Democrats have done to Republicans. Is they have listened to how Republicans speak and they use it against you. So right now we're actually getting hit with this in Indiana. By libertarians are getting hit by this by hardcore progressive Democrats. It's watering the tree of liberty without an umbrella. It's because the Republicans are doing all of these things about Obama not holding his own umbrella and stuff like that, and then these gun things. So the progressive Democrats have started attacking libertarians, and when they do it, they're using the words that we're using. And I actually corrected them and said it's not watering the tree of liberty, it's refreshing the tree. But they're starting to use our own language against us in our talking points. And they've done that successfully to Republicans over the past 15 years. And it was a definite shift where they literally sat down and listened and said, these are their talking points. And now they turn around during just weeks before the election, you had Reverend Jesse Jackson on MSNBC talking about code words like urban. And anytime you hear a Republican say these words such as social safety net is code for black entitlement, and would go through these things and literally. So start listening to them. That's what I've done and how I've learned how to talk to Democrats, is by listening to what they say and then using those talking points back, but using them in my argument back to them.
The hard left has always been a generation ahead of everyone else in language technology, how they do stuff. I mean, study this stuff. Really, it's persuasive. I can't think of. Learn how to be persuasive in your talking. I mean, we actually were part of the things we did at the training is, okay, I'm going to deliver this testimony, and you tell me if you were persuaded. If I can't persuade a libertarian, I'm not going to persuade a Democrat or Republican. And most of us were not born libertarians, so remember how you used to think, whatever it was 5, 10, 20 years ago, and like, okay, what would have convinced me about this? We only got a couple minutes left. One very key thing I do want to, I'm sorry to bring this up before, is you're just a volunteer, so you're a citizen lobbyist if you want, you're a legislative activist. You don't have like a law firm or a lobbying firm, or you're not playing with the big boys. And this is actually true for people in the system as well, or SRFs. The only currency you have is your credibility and your reputation. That's it. Because we don't have any money to give them. We might have a few votes, but that is the only thing you have. Because even if you represent a small organization, if you are the guy who knows this stuff, or the girl who knows this stuff, that's what's going to win your arguments, and that's what's going to give you the influence. So guard your reputation like it's gold, because once you lose it, that's it. I have a friend of mine, he goes to legislature all the time. All everybody remembers is that 30 years ago he used to live in a tree. Nobody listens to him. But we have one, he's an actual rep. They're like, oh God, he's the International Bar Association guy. He doesn't mention it anymore. He hasn't mentioned it for years. but that's his reputation. That's all he's got. Versus, you know, I have the reputation where I've gone into a bill, shredded a representative's bill, and he chased me out the hall, asking me how to fix it. I mean, that's, I mean, I've kind of, you know, like I said, I've been doing this long enough, you know, there's a group of us, we're like the special forces guys who can do that sort of thing. But because I know the subject matter very well on this stuff, and if you get to that point where you can go, you know, talk about what's election law, labor law, environmental stuff, gun rights, literally every time you open your mouth, you have to think, okay, what are these people going to think about me when I'm done? And if they're going to think I'm a fool, that's it.
Yeah.
Just stop. Don't even show up anymore. Take a year off because you're not going to. That's because they all talk to each other. They're like, oh yeah, that was the guy. Like I said, the Roman Empire guy. That's all he's ever going to be. And I think the bill was about jury rights or something, but whatever. I stopped listening when he said Roman Empire. I'm pretty sure the committee chair stopped listening when he said Roman Empire. The gold standard, the Bilderbergers, forget about it. The other thing is this is a purely pragmatic activism. Your principles do not matter. The reps do not care about philosophy. They don't care about the Constitution, with a couple exceptions. They love the First Amendment, and if you have something about like no unfunded mandates in your state constitution, you can usually use that. But there's very few exceptions about that. It's all about how much does this cost? Can it be implemented? Or is there unforeseen consequences? You're attacking these things on a purely pragmatic level, and that upsets a lot of libertarians, and that's part of the training you've got to get to, but this is dirt under your fingernails politics. And if I can kill a bill by saying this thing's going to cost $1 million more than you think versus this violates the principles of the Constitution, I want to kill the bad bill. You know, whether I have to shoot it or stab it, it doesn't really matter. You know, you want the bill to die. And the good bill, I may go for these highfalutin things and concepts, but I usually go for the pragmatic thing. This will save the state money. This is less paperwork. You know, your constituents want this. Not, well, the Constitution says here, an article this, an article that, whatever, their eyes glaze over. Don't mention their oath of office. They hate that. They really, I've literally seen reps like, oh my God, shut up. Like one of my activists said that, and I'm just like, you really know you shouldn't say that. But he's the guy who always brings up everyone's oath of office, and that's what he does. And I'm like, okay, fine, that's your thing. And maybe one of them will start realizing what they have to do. But this reputation you develop, and you can develop it. It's, if you want to be, if you're serious about this, you can do that. And I think, I've met most of the people here. If you're serious enough, you're smart enough, you can do this. In a couple of years, you can be the go-to person for an issue, especially as you get new reps who don't know stuff. You can be like, oh, yeah, 3 or 4 years ago we talked about this bill and it died because we had this problem, and this bill has the same problem. Oh, now you know more than the lobbyists, now you know more than the reps, which is your job. Maybe said we have to fight smarter, because we're already fighting hard enough. So we really have to fight smarter.
And you have to, speaking of reputation, you have to know what your actions, the consequences of them. Very active this session. There was a new person who decided he wanted to start lobbying the legislature on behalf of libertarian principles, and he did a really good job. Except he went to one legislator and basically bashed him for his bill. He went there in the hopes of talking him out of, talking him into pulling his bill, which was not going to happen that way. It had already gone through committee and it was heading to the Senate floor. And it's not getting pulled. It passed the committee unanimously. You're not going to get him to pull this bill. So instead, he went up to him, and when he couldn't get the bill pulled, he berated him. Said, you're not a small, or you're not a real conservative, you're not out to protect the rights of the individual, you're a statist. And the bill was actually on DNA testing for anybody who has been arrested, not charged, arrested for a felony, automatically gets DNA testing.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And what ended up happening, now I knew that this bill was not going to go forward. It was going to pass the Senate and it was going to die in the House because the majority of the people in the House are very privacy oriented. It's weird, but it is that way. It was going to die in the House. Had he talked to me, I could have said, don't bother going and trying to talk the senator out of this bill. You're not going to. This is his baby. But don't worry, it's going to die in the House, and if you want to make sure, here's the people to talk to. Instead, he berates the senator, pisses him off. So now, literally, 3 hours later, when I'm there to ask him for his help with corralling his buddies in the House to help organize our bill getting a good vote in committee in the House, he says, I really don't want to talk to you Libertarians right now. And not only was it because this person berated him in public and in front of a whole bunch of people, but then wrote about it as well. And so this is now a legislator that I could not talk to the rest of the session because our relationship is now done. He doesn't want to work with us anymore. And it will be, I will probably, if I feel it's necessary, I will probably have to try to work with him on something the next session. Make a point of going out of my way to help him with something just to get that back. But he was my key person that I needed for my committee in the House. And because of that, we didn't get our House committee vote. So there are consequences to what people are doing and the reputation of everybody. So you want to make sure that if you're working as a group, that you're coordinating and working with each other. This situation was this person wasn't working with the group and was doing it on their own, but unfortunately positioned themselves like they were. And so we all kind of had to take the bullet on it. And I didn't throw him under the bus and go up to that senator and say, oh, he's crazy, he's not, I mean, he doesn't work with us, he's from some county down south, we don't know who he is. Instead, it was just, okay, well, this is a learning experience for you. This is the consequences of what you did. So, don't berate anybody.
That kind of thing. I mean, that what you just illustrated. I mean, that was okay, your interpersonal skills, the knowledge of the system, the personal relationships, the consequences. There's a lot of moving parts. It's an ecosystem. I've actually that kind of stuff happens. You get these new activists are very fired up. They want to do stuff, and I have to be like, yeah, they're not with us. And luckily, our group has a reputation when we can say that, and people are like, oh, okay, they're the crazy libertarians. We're the reasonable libertarians. That's the, you want to be the reasonable person in the room. The smart person, don't waste the legislator's time. You want to be, ultimately, when you sit down at that table to deliver your testimony, you want them all to think, okay, they're not going to waste my time. You want to be the smartest person in the room and keep going that. And we could literally do days of this kind of training and stuff. So hopefully this was helpful. I said I'm happy to talk with people about this while I'm here. Help you get some stuff set up.
Yeah, same here.
Thanks, guys.